I've been so looking forward to sitting down with you and updating my reading journal together. August has yielded some of the highest rated reads of mine for the entire year so far. And it was a really cool mix of my favourite genres like romance and fantasy, but also some genres like thriller that I really typically don't go near. And my journal was an opportunity for me to try out some exciting new stationery too, both in my book review spreads and also in my stats pages that we'll set up together for September. Hello, my name's Erin, thank you for joining me. We're picking up straight away with the August calendar and updating my progress on all of the books I had read around about halfway through the month. Each one of these colourful marker lines represents a different book that I was reading against the timeline that is the month. So I have a visual representation of how long it was taking me to read the books over the course of the month. In the case of August, if it was a book that I was reading with my eyes, an ebook in this case, it took me a really long time to finish one. In fact, I think I only finished one this month. I absolutely borrowed this idea from Amanda, also known as Books Ergo Sum on Instagram. I just love the way this page looks at the end of the month, and I needed to print off some more book covers, which I use my little HP Sprocket mini printer to do. I have a link to that, as well as everything else that I'm using in the description, or at least as many things as I can link to based on the character limit for the description. And I also have a short about exactly how I print these book covers, so I'll make sure that's linked in the description too in case you want to find out how I like to do it. As much as I enjoy this calendar progress layout, I'm going to be mixing it up for September. I just felt ready to try something new, so you'll get to kind of see two different ways that I do this in this video, although I won't be obviously filling out the September ones because I haven't got there yet, and neither have you. Or maybe you have if you're watching this later. Maybe you're a time traveler. On the right page, we have what I call my Maybe Next, which is where I filled out kind of the books that I thought I might want to read throughout the month. I did end up reading all of the books that I'd forecasted and some extra ones, so pretty proud of myself there. I don't know if I'm as much of a mood reader as I once thought I was. I had this one space left over from last month where I'd reviewed a novella on the top half of the page, and I actually deliberately read another novella so that I'd have something to fill this space. So it's funny how your reading journal can inform the way that you read. It's very strange. FYI, I will be talking about the books I read in this voiceover, but I will not give you spoilers in the voiceover ever. I'm just not about that. There will be spoilers in the written reviews though, so if you really want to know my thoughts, you can pause and read if you want, but don't read it if you want to avoid those. Anyway, Lonely Hearts Radio is one of the Audible originals. I read it kind of over the cusp of the end of July and into August. It's a cute little fluffy rom-com that follows two people navigating life in New York at the turn of the new millennium back in 1999. Very early 2000. One is a lovely Welsh girl who has matchmaker powers inherently somehow, and the other is an Aussie dude called Rue. Bit of an on-the-nose name for an Australian character. As an Australian, I feel like I can say that pretty safely, but he's voiced by Adam Demos, so at least his accent is correct because he's voiced by an actual Australian. It's cute and fluffy. It had a couple of moments that made me go, oh god, no. I feel like you kind of know what you're getting into when you choose an Audible original, if you've read any of the short Audible original options before, because they all kind of have a vibe, a style that's quite similar. I gave it 3 3/4 stars, so not quite 4 stars. And I'm just moving forward to my tracking pages for August so I can update that over here too. I like to have all this stuff on the same page at a glance so that I can really see where each book landed as far as enjoyment each month. And one more book I need to do my review for, still kind of back in the July pages because I had a gap here, and it was a book that spanned both months as well, is A Tempest of Tea by Hafsah Faizal. Someone was reading this earlier in the year and I just fell for the cover. I was like, what a beautiful book cover. And it took me a while to get around to it, but I'm really glad I did because I loved this book. Since I started using the Corpile rating system, which was devised by G of the channel Book Roast, it is not my own system, but I have been using it. I don't know if I'm going to keep using it next year, but I'm committed to it for this year anyway. Since I started using that system, I have not given 5 stars to a single book, but this one comes pretty close. It's a fantasy story, there are vampires, there is magic, there's great racial representation in the main characters. It was just such a fun ride. There was always something happening. I found I always wanted to pick the book up and continue. I wanted to know what was going on, which was really hard because I went away on a family trip while I was halfway through this book and didn't get a lot of time to read it. So I was like, no, please, I want to go back to my book. I love being here with you all, but I really want to go back to my book. Something I really enjoyed about this one is how complex but also still really relatable and understandable the main characters are. Our girl on the cover there, that's Ihli. She owns a tea shop, although there is blood in that teacup that she's showing you because some of her clientele are kind of underground and they're vampires and she feeds them. She has a heart of gold, but she kind of has this crook reputation. If you ask me, she's just a gal who knows how to get things done, especially in this world where everyone who's supposed to be in a position of authority is actually quite corrupt, it seems. We've got action, we've got adventure, we've got a romance subplot, but it's not like the main part of the book. This is not a romantasy, it's kind of an underlying thing. I feel like I'm not really selling it, I'm not explaining it very well because it's such a complicated story, but if I can't sell you, maybe this quote from it can that I'm lettering here now. It really stood out to me because this just suits me down to the ground. The quote is, "Why save the world when you could have tea?" Honestly, I could not agree more. There were actually so many great quotes from this book, and when I'm listening on audiobook, I typically don't stop to make note of quotes unless they really grab me, because I have to kind of like make a voice note if I'm driving or something like that. I went out of my way for 3 from this book, and I'm going to make sure they're all on the page because they were all so good. Look, it's not my prettiest review page ever. It really is a motley bunch of things. I have some stickers from JOURNALSAY that are just kind of antique things because I felt like they fit the vibe. I've got the marbly paper because I just have so much marbly paper at the moment. I feel like I need to use some of it and get it out of my collection. And I have these tea stickers from a washi tape roll from the washi tape shop, because the tea shop in the book is actually very, very important. And I'm using a fountain pen for some of my reviews this time, not all of them, but the blue felt like it worked with the rest of the page. That's what was inked in this pen, so I figured I'd just keep to the theme. In case this is your first time coming across the Quarpile rating system, the idea here is that you rate across 7 different categories out of 10, so that's characters, atmosphere, writing, plot, intrigue, logic, and enjoyment. You work out the total score out of 70, you divide that score by 7, and it gives you a decimal point number, which corresponds to some star rating numbers that I have a reference for further back in my journal. I got 4.5 stars for Tempest of Tea, which I feel is pretty accurate. Sometimes lately my Quarpile ratings have not been coming out quite where I expect them to, and I feel like maybe I want to change things up for next year, but I haven't quite decided yet how I'm going to do that. So I printed off some extra book covers. At the point we were up to here in the month, that was all I'd read, so I'm just sticking these to my pages with some washi stickers so I know where I'm at. All of that was done on the 12th of August. This time around we're on the 24th. So let's go ahead and update the progress calendar here with everything that I've read in between then and now. Beyond my monthly trackers, I also have some yearly trackers back at the beginning of the book. This one's just a list of all of the books that I've read so far this year, so I wanted to update that because I have a few more done since we last spoke. I was a little worried this list wasn't going to get me through till the end of the year, but I've recently realized that this book is not going to get me through till the end of the year, so I think maybe that's fine. Over the page from this, I also have a goal tracker for the year. I set myself the goal of reading 100 books in 2024, and I'm on track to hit that, but I'm enjoying separating this out by color. I got this idea from a post on the Archer and Olive blog when I was setting this up back at the beginning of the year. So all the blue books I'm coloring in are books that I read in August, and there's a little key down the bottom so you can see how it all plays out. I mentioned in my vlog recently that my book bracket, this one is kind of broken. It's funny, but I'll stick to it for the rest of the year too, because what else am I going to do? Also, if you're liking the look of my little star rating stamp here, I got this one on Etsy, but so many places make them now, so you have some options out there. I thought I would finish the night Circus before Better Left Unsent, but that is not how it worked out, so our next review page is for Better Left Unsent by Leah Lewis. I've read a couple of her books on audiobook, and I've now heard the narrators pronounce her name Leah Lewis and Leah Louie, and I don't know which one is correct. Either way, she writes really fun books. I really have enjoyed everything of hers that I've read so far. The cover for this one has this kind of orange and green thing going on, so I used that as the basis for my own colour scheme for my review page here. And also, I should tell you a bit about the book. You can probably imply from the title Better Left Unsent that maybe male has something to do with it, since I've gone for stamps as a big theme here. The main character in this book, her name is Millie. She's an early 30s corporate girlie in the UK. And someone gave her some really bad advice once and she took it. They said every time you have bad thoughts about your coworkers or you are really tempted to write something horrible back to them in an email because they're treating you badly or whatever, you should still write the email, just don't send it, just save it to your drafts. Poor Millie, of course, she takes this advice and she writes all of these emails with her true thoughts about things, not just to her coworkers, but to other people in her life. And there is a glitch in their server when things are being updated and all of her drafts get sent to everyone. And there are consequences. Girl should have just kept a journal, seriously. The things that get sent out are to her friends and to her coworkers and to her ex. And I know that sounds like it has a lot of potential for cringe, but I actually think the way they've handled all of this in this book is really quite classy. Like, Millie just steps up and owns her stuff. She really learns a lot from the experience, she grows a lot. I always love when a main character in a book really grows, but it kind of just grows into better versions of themselves. They don't sort of become different people by the end of the book. That's definitely Millie. It's a rom-com, so of course there is a really fun storyline here too. This one is closed door. In case you're concerned about spice in your books, this might be a really good choice for you. I'm really gravitating towards the UK-based rom-coms at the moment. That probably has a lot to do with the fact that I'm visiting the UK in October. And for those of you who love a rom-com the way I do, I just want to mention that this book has one of the best first date scenes ever. I was so excited by it. It really made me so happy. Your mileage may vary, but I just really love a thoughtful, considerate male main character, and that is definitely what the male main character in this book is, although right now I can't remember his name. Jack, I think? It was something very one syllable and I guess common. Yeah, Jack. I just wrote it. It must be that. When you're using this quartile rating system, it's always really convenient when your total number is something that's divisible by 7, because then it's very easy to work out what your main score is going to be. I gave Better Left Unsent 49 out of 70, which makes it a flat 7, which makes it 4 stars. An even 7, maybe I should say. It's not a dominant chord. That was a little music reference for you. Now that we've got the quartile score and also the star rating, we can flip back to the monthly stats and fill that one in there so I can see how Better Left Unsent fits in with the other books that I've read this month and where it sits as far as score ranking things. My next read is The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern, and this one took me quite a while to read because I was reading with my eyeballs on ebook on my Kindle, and I just did not have a great deal of time for that this month, unfortunately. I think it took me almost the full month, although don't quote me on that. We'll find out when I write it down in a minute. Not only am I matching the book cover here because it's black and white on the book cover, I'm also matching a big theme of the book, which is a circus that is also all in black and white. So much marble paper going on this month. I'm using black marble paper for this one. This one's actually a book that I believe my friends Ellie and Brooke recommended to me quite a while ago. I didn't have it written in my Maybe Next section at the beginning of this journal, but I think I did have it written in the Maybe Next at the beginning of my previous reading journal. I'm pretty sure we just went into a bookshop one day and they gave me all of their recommendations and I just wrote them all down in my journal in one go. This one's a little bit of an older book. This one came out in 2011. And we've got some Victorian vibes going on here as well. This one is set in the late Victorian era, kind of the very end of the 1800s into the very beginning of the 1900s. We've got 2 protagonists for this one, Marco and Celia, and they are both magically talented people. They've both grown up under the tutelage of some magically inclined people who came before them, and they are being pitted against each other somewhat unknowingly in some kind of a challenge. They know that they're in a challenge, and they know that they're supposed to win, but they don't have any of the finer details. All they know is that they're bound into this challenge, and that they'll know when it starts and they'll know when it's finished. And only one of them can win. Their challenge ends up being tied to this incredible traveling circus, just called the Night Circus, except in French. And because both of these magically inclined people are pouring everything they have into this circus to make it the most magical thing, to prove that their magic is the superior one or whatever, this circus ends up really freaking cool. One of the categories in the quartile rating system is the eye for intrigue, which is kind of a vague one. For me, this was a book with a lot of intrigue. There was a lot that was mysterious that you weren't really clued in on until quite close to the end of the book. It was also just like a really cool environment to spend time in. The circus ends up with kind of a fan club, and you really feel like you're part of that fan club because it just would be such a cool thing to experience. And it's also a love story, and I have some issues with that part of it, actually. I'm not sold on Marco, our male main character. I think he's got some dodginesses about him. It's actually so interesting how much the way that we look at the relationships in books has changed in the past 15 years, because this book is about that old, and I feel like a lot of the stuff that came out around that time, we maybe let the men get away with stuff that we wouldn't really anymore. But I loved Celia, so I'm still giving this book a pretty decently high 4.25 stars, which is 7.43 on the Corpal rating scale. On the whole, I picked some good books to read this month. I have had a pretty high average star rating all the way across the board. Speaking of books with high star ratings, here's Ask for Andrea. This was our Page Mages book club read for the month of August. If you're not familiar with the Page Mages, it is my very own book club that I run through the channel membership program here on YouTube. There is a QR code on the screen right now if you're keen to check out more about that, or you can hit the join link down in the description or next to the subscribe button if you're keen to find out a bit more. It's kind of like Patreon, except right here on YouTube, and the Page Mages is my highest level of membership. So over on my Discord server, which you also need to be a channel member to access, we have a Discord channel every month for our monthly book club read. This was the one for August. And we also have a little chat, a little kind of live Zoom call kind of a thing, except on Discord at the end of every month to discuss the book. And I come up with some questions for each book too, so we can have a very guided and maybe insightful discussion, which is what I'm doing on the right page here. I've worked out what my questions are and I'm just answering them for myself, so that when we have our chat about it, which at the time I'm publishing this will be in a little over 12 hours from the time of publishing the video, but I like to have my spread done before we have our chat about it, because it really makes me aware of how I'm going to lead the discussion and what the questions are going to be, and really get an idea of what I thought about the book and how I felt about things too. So, about Ask for Andrea. This is such a wonderful book. It is so very dark. It is so very heartwarming. I have so many feelings. A couple of trigger warnings maybe for this one around murder. I'm not usually much of a thriller reader, and this one describes itself as a thriller, although it's not a genre that I spend a lot of time reading. Some of the members in my Discord have mentioned that they don't consider this one a true thriller, so, proceed as you like. But our three main characters are dead, and they were all murdered by the same man, and now in death, they're in whatever form it is that in this world we take after death, and they are trying to help the women that he's targeting next. And maybe in the process also help their families find out what happened to them and stuff like that too, because a lot of them are finding themselves the subject of unsolved mysteries. I know that sounds bleak as heck, but this book is actually so beautiful. It's written in such a poignant way, and the way that it deals with the afterlife is really interesting. It's not kind of something I've come across before. I actually ended up giving this one the same Corpal score as A Tempest of Tea, which makes them evenly matched for my top read for August, but I've noticed here, I guess I wasn't looking at that at the time I was setting this up, I've rounded up the star rating here to give it 4 3/4, whereas I only did 4.5 for A Tempest of Tea. As far as star ratings go, they actually should have the same thing, so sorry about that. I didn't notice until I was editing the video, so if that annoys you, I'm very sorry. We'll chat a bit later on about what the Page Mages book choice is for next month, but in the meantime, I've got another review to do before we get into September things, and that is for Done and Dusted by Lyla Sage, which was another book club read for me. This was actually last month's book club book for my Literary Ladies book club, which is one I have with some local friends. I actually deliberately read this one late though, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to make our book club meeting, so I decided it was okay to wait for a library hold to come through rather than buying the book, since I wasn't going to be able to talk about it with everyone at the time that the meeting happened anyway. And I'm glad I did, because I was kind of lukewarm on this book. Pardon the pun, the male main character's name is Luke, and I was lukewarm. I'm sorry, I didn't do it on purpose. I think I might have just reached cowboy romance saturation for now, because I have been reading the Chestnut Springs series this year, and by all means that's not really like 3 other cowboy romance books. It's not really that much cowboy romance, but it's also just not really my genre. I'm not really a country girl. I'm more of a city metropolitan kind of gal, so this just isn't me. Small towns, sure, but not so much the cowboy vibes. Anyway, our main character, Emmy, short for Clementine, is a barrel racer. They didn't really explain what that is in the book, and to this day I don't really know, but that's what she is. She's been thrown off a horse recently and she's quite traumatized by it and nobody knows, and she moves home to the family farm and starts noticing the boy that she considered a bit of a terrorizer when she was younger, and is like, oh, actually maybe I might be really into him now. Look, it's a pretty easy read. It's quite fluffy. It's very spicy. The spicy scenes kind of weren't my vibe. I don't know what to tell you. It just wasn't doing it for me. I don't mind a spicy book, but this just, wasn't my kind of spice. I didn't not enjoy it necessarily. I think it was just okay. 3 stars from me on this one, and I think I probably won't continue the series. Also, I hate in romance books when they break the fourth wall and the female main character says something like, "This isn't a romance book, Luke," and you're like, yes it is. Stop being so meta. I don't know why that irks me so much, but it does. Once again, we're flashing forward into the future. I've got some book covers to print, and I usually like to do 2 at a time when I print my book covers. I've got a little list here on a post-it so I know what I actually need to print. I find if I print 2 of each book cover at a time, then I've got 1 to go on this kind of progress tracker, maybe next page, and then I've also got 1 to go on the review page, and that just saves me so much time. Probably also motivates me to actually read the book too, because I'm like, well, I've already printed it, so now I have to read it. And I usually just stash the spare covers, if I'm not quite ready to use them yet, on the pages that are upcoming, or I'll tuck them into the pocket in the back of the book, although I have lost a couple that way, so I try not to do that, the pocket in the book thing. I hadn't actually finished Yours Truly yet, but I was pretty far through it at this point, which is why I went ahead and printed it out and allocated it a space for its review. But what it's time to actually do now is turn the page and get stuck into my September theme setup, because I have so many excellent books coming up that I think I'm probably going to read in September. If you caught my last video reviewing the Sterling Ink stationery subscription kits, you might recognize some of the stuff I'm using here, stuff from the Sterling Ink September subscription, which is great because it's got dates on it, so you can really only use some of this stuff in this month. Like that vellum September page that I'm using basically to just carry the whole cover page here on the left side, I'm just teaming that up with some washi tapes that I think look nice with it. They're from a set from JOURNALSAY. So the whole September theme this time is basically 2 washi tapes and stickers from this set. It's a pretty unexpected color combination for me. I just pulled colors out of the designs of the stickers, so that's how this really came about. But it's also super appropriate because September is the beginning of spring for those of us in the Southern Hemisphere, so it really works out for a little Aussie September moment. I like it. Also, easiest cover page ever. I'm using a B5 journal, so that September sheet of vellum that's like a little bit see-through, it's basically the whole theme of that page, really saved me some time. I love that. We're setting up the stats page on the right side pretty much exactly the same way as last month, just because I really like this layout and it's easy, but we're going to really change things up on the next spread, so stay tuned for that. But for now, we're doing some more decoration at the top and bottom to make these 2 pages kind of look like they belong next to each other. They've got similar decoration. And rather than brush lettering all of my stats categories this time, I'm going to stamp them instead. I have just realized I wrote book completed instead of books completed. I'm so sorry. I actually set this up on a live stream with my channel members, and if any of them pointed that out, I missed it, so sorry about that, pals. Also, if you're a channel member and you want to watch me set up these September pages in real time, that's something you can do. The live is on my page, but you have to be a Jubilant Journals or a Page Mages level channel member to access it. Also, please enjoy the accidental scrap paper that I'm making in the bottom left there. When I'm using this ink pad, it's oil-based, and that doesn't always go so well with other stationery products, so I always like to try and wipe off the extra ink every time I use a stamp, so accidental scrapbooking paper. It's on the back of the instructions for a sewing pattern that I still need though, so I can't actually rip this up and use it as scrapbooking paper just yet. I got a bit carried away with the live stream and didn't realize when I was no longer recording, so we've missed a little chunk there. I'm very sorry about that, but if you want to see how it came together, it's the same setup as last month, so you can go back and check out my what I read in July and setting up for August video if you'd like to see how this really works. Moving on to my progress page, and this is where we're going to get really different this month. Rather than doing a calendar setup like I've been doing for most of this year, instead I really just had a stamp that I really wanted to use and I wanted to make sure that I could incorporate it. So I've changed the way I'm doing this tracking thing for the stamp, basically. I typically never have more than 2, maybe maximum 3 books on the go at any one time, so I figured by having 4 spaces to track books here, I wouldn't have too much trouble. And the space at the top is just for me to stamp the date with this stamp that I'm really excited about. So this is just like a linear way of tracking the books rather than a calendar. It's kind of loosely inspired by Wit's Journal's progress bars that she has in her reading journal over on Instagram, but I've also changed it quite a bit, so even showing you what hers looks like isn't that helpful because it doesn't look like this at all. I'll show you what I mean once it's all set up and it will probably make a bit more sense then. This memo pad is from Archer & Olive's A Vintage Library stationery subscription box about a year ago, and I just haven't done it justice. It's lovely. It's made to look like little vintage library cards. Isn't it sweet? So I thought rather than just having a cavernous gap where I put my book covers this time, I would divide them into little categories and have different book covers on different backings for the different categories. So the first one is my typical Maybe Next, and I'm thinking that's just stuff from my overall annual list of Maybe Nexts that I want to make sure I get to, or stuff from my series tracker that I've maybe been neglecting a little bit. The middle one here is going to be mood reads, so that's anything that I kind of didn't predict that I would want to read at the beginning of the month that came out of nowhere and surprised me. I've actually cut that one down the middle so that it will sit nicely across the binding, because this book is getting very chunky because I'm pretty close to the end of it. I think we're going to fit the rest of September in, but I don't know if we're going to get much more juice out of this journal, unfortunately. I also totally went to write Maybe Next again. Oops, that's what I usually write in this journal, so I guess it's a creature of habit thing. And this third one on the right here that's kind of a yellowy creamy colour, that one's going to be where I list out all of my library holds, which is a big category because that's where most of my books come from these days. This is the stamp I was talking about. This is actually from the same Archer & Olive subscription box, and it's just a little date stamp, like an old school office tool kind of a date stamp that I guess are probably somewhat obsolete now, but I just thought it would be really fun to include here. So I assume originally they intended you to use it with the library card kind of memo pad thing. I'm just going to use it to stamp every single date for September across the top here, and I'm going to have a great time doing it. Now that this is all down on the page, I feel like it's going to make a lot more sense to explain. So say I start a book on the 3rd and I finish it over here on the 13th, I'll just colour in those boxes for that space, write the name of the book on top of it, and it's basically the same thing as the calendar, except it's just in a line instead of all wrapped around one page. That's the bare bones of the layout. Now we jump in with the washi tapes and the stickers, and we make it look like it belongs with the previous page. I haven't left myself a whole lot of space for decoration, so I'm using this little straight edge cutting tool thingy to chop down the purpley pinky washi tape to make it fit the spaces a little bit better. I love just like slicing my washi tape down to size when it's too wide for a space. It's really handy. I'm also trying to keep in mind that I'm going to have lots of book covers down here in these spaces, so it's going to look busier than it does right now at the end of the month. So I'm trying not to over decorate because then things will get hectic, and I don't love a hectic page. Not today, anyway. In my themed pages, I always like to include one for our Page Majors Book of the Month, just because I like to give it its own special little space and kind of celebrate that a little bit because I love my book club. It's really fun. Since we did top and bottom decoration somewhat on both of the previous spreads, I thought I'd mix it up a bit and do left and right decoration this time instead. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about our book for the month. I don't want to ruin anything though. This one was chosen by our lovely Marie. It's called Playing with Fire by R.J. Blaine, and the tagline describes it as a magical romantic comedy with a body count, which sounds very intriguing. If you're not yet a page mage but you're keen to read this one with us, once again there is a join link down in the description that might be of interest to you. The last section of this video I shot on this here very day, the 30th of August, the same day this video is being published, and Mitsu is an excellent reading helper. He definitely likes to oversee the reading journal setup process. For now, he's going to oversee while I populate the progress page of this September setup that we've just done, set some intentions, and work out what the heck I might be reading through September. Most of these are library holds that I've been waiting several weeks for, so it's highly likely that I will read these ones that I've printed covers for. I have a couple of other ideas bumping around in my brain, but I haven't sourced those books yet, so I'm not going to pop those ones down on the page because it's less likely that I will read them. Excuse me, Mitsu. I need to access my library hold section. I'm finally getting my hands on a copy of Funny Story by Emily Henry. I can't wait. I've heard a lot of good things about Butcher and Blackbird, so I've got that on there as well. And Part of Your World, which is the first one in the Abby Jimenez series that I've been reading. I'm reading them backwards. I'm reading them completely out of order. I've also got Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. I'm currently partway through Business Casual by B.K. Borison, and our two maybe next books over here are Playing with Fire, obviously, for the Page Majors, and the other one is my Literary Ladies Book Club, which is The Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren. Usually I go in and put the star rating stamp ready to be filled in on my books on this page, but I thought this time I'll only add them if I actually read the book, and that'll kind of be my key of like, did I read this or not? We've got one more book review to do, some trackers to update, and some reading stats for the month of August to fill out. Let's set up a review page for Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez, which is the second book in the Part of Your World series. I didn't enjoy this one as much as Just for the Summer. I thought I was gonna like it more. In fact, the first maybe 70% of the book, I was so in. It had so many of the tropes that I like. I'm a sucker for fake dating and I'm a sucker for a slow burn, but the last like 30% of this book lost me. And I think that's really just a personal preference thing. There are some stuff that just turns me off in books, and it's just because of the way that I like to live my life, and this had some of that. The ending, however, was very satisfying. Everything was nicely wrapped up and concluded. We just had to go down a really frustrating road to get there, I guess. At the time I'm recording this voiceover, which is actually only like a couple of hours after I set up this page, I only finished this book literally this morning, so it's very fresh in my mind, and I feel like the trauma is still really fresh too. But I did really like this quote that a lot of characters say all the way through the book, which is that love shows up, so I thought we'd put that down the bottom of the page. Honestly, so much of this book is just the two main characters getting to know each other at home, having conversations and hanging out, so there wasn't really a lot of opportunity for me to put a lot of stickerage into the book. That's okay, I'm totally fine with that, but I kind of tried to invert the colours of the cover, and I feel like we've landed somewhere that's a very McDonald's colour scheme, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Truly, the first 70% of this book had me thinking it was going to be like an over 4-star kind of a. Maybe once upon a time I would have just given it 5 stars if I was still rating things off the vibes, but you know what? We didn't really land there. I ended up with 6.57 on the Corpile scale, which makes it 3.5 stars. And I was planning to go straight into Part of Your World after this one, but I think I need a little break from the series, so I think I'm just going to do Funny Story next instead. Also, check me out. Now that I am a library girl, I am apparently completely happy to read a series backwards, because this is the second time I've done it recently. Let's go all the way back to the start of the journal and update my reading list of every book that I have read this year so far. We're also going to update the goal tracker so that it's back up to date as well. Since I had 2 books with the same star rating for my top read, I thought I would just kind of pick the one that I felt like vibed the best for my book bracket, so I've gone with A Tempest of Tea here. I think I maybe like it incrementally more than Ask for Andrea. I have to print my book covers at a really specific size for the book bracket, so I'm not going to do that in this video. We'll do that later when I've got lots to do in one go. But let's talk about reading stats for August, which I realize is not quite over, but I'm not going to finish a book tomorrow, so it's fine. I've come in at 7 books completed in August, a total of 2,176 pages read. My average rating was 3.96, which I think is plenty close enough to round up to 4 stars. My average time to read was 9 days, probably because it took me a full month to read The Night Circus, and that dragged my average right down. I read 29% digital books and 71% audiobooks. 17% of those books had less than 300 pages, 83% had 300 to 499 pages. 37.5% of the books I read were books that I paid for, whether that was an Audible credit or a Kindle store purchase, and 62.5% of them were books I sourced from the library. I like that ratio. Genres this month encompassed romance, contemporary, fantasy, YA, thriller, horror, and historical, and my standout book I have decided to go with A Tempest of Tea since it's the one that I decided to also put in the book bracket. But I don't want to just print one book cover. So I'm just, for example, like the funny story one, that's where it's going to go. I'm just not going to print one book cover just to go there. I'll wait until I have some other book covers to print alongside it, you know? Going all the way back to the start again, these are my book club pages, so I'm just going to put my Literary Ladies book on the left side here. We don't do a book to a month, we just do it as our schedules allow, so that's why it's a little wonky. I'm okay with that. And the page majors, of course, we've got to put Playing with Fire on here as well. I am loving how my page majors page looks, and it's actually almost 1 year since we started our little page majors book club. It was November last year, and it was actually a suggestion from one of my channel members. Let's just quickly update the goal tracker so it's up to the 68 books that I have read for the year, and now let's have a little flip through. Thank you so much for coming with me for all my reading journal updates for August. I have had a blast setting this up with you. As always, please let me know what your standout read for August was. I always want to hear what you're reading too. Also, if you set a reading goal for the year, how are you going on it? Are you feeling like you're going to hit it? Are you feeling like it was a bit ambitious? Remember, this is just a silly thing that we do for fun, so if you're behind on your reading goal, it really doesn't matter. That's okay. And it's also totally okay to just pick some really short books to get you back up to date if that's a thing you want to do, because this is all just silly and fun, so don't put too much pressure on yourself, okay? I said so. If you're finishing up this video feeling a little bit inspired to maybe start your own reading journal, here's a link to a video I made recently where I show you exactly how to start a reading journal that's going to fit your lifestyle. And if you feel like talking about books a little bit more with me, there is a link underneath that to all of my reading journal videos in a playlist, so we can keep talking about books if you like.